Somehow we are already a few weeks into the new year. And what that means is that most people in this country and the world will have already abandoned their New Year's resolutions. But if you have abandoned a New Year's resolution, you know that this is never a snap choice we make. This is always the result of just trickling off your goal, just forgetting what you set out to do. So today I want to talk about how I see this happen to writers all the time. Let's talk about the sneaky ways writers procrastinate. Stay tuned. You've got the story, you've got the idea, you just don't know the steps in the process. If this is what's holding your memoir back, I have got the solution for you. The Memoir Method Checklist is going to take you through every single step you need from idea to published marketable book. And you can download it now at pageandpodium.com/checklist. So I spend a lot of time talking to writers, and most of that time is talking to writers who are struggling in some way. Either they have realized that they need a little bit more support, a little more training, they're kind of not sure how to go forward, or just as commonly, they realize that they have stalled out, that they are not moving forward the way they wanted to, that something is getting in their way. But I will tell you what, the vast majority of these writers would not describe themselves as procrastinators. And the reason for that is that we writers over these centuries have found all kinds of ways to procrastinate while telling ourselves that we're doing what we need to do. So that's why today I want to talk about the 4 most common ways that I see writers procrastinate even while they are telling themselves that they're just doing what they need to do. At the end of the video, I'm going to give you one foolproof tip to make sure that you are keeping yourself accountable throughout the new year, throughout your big book goals. But as we go through each of these 4 sneaky ways, I'm going to talk a little bit about the causes and therefore how you can short circuit this procrastination tool and get back on track the way that I know you want to. But first, let's start by talking about what procrastination is and, just as importantly, what it isn't. Now, today when I'm talking about procrastination, I am talking about plugging other things into your schedule when you had planned to write. Now, this of course assumes that you have a plan to write. Just as commonly, the plan is just in folks' head. I'll get to it at some point. Oh, maybe this weekend. Oh, maybe next weekend. We're not really making a structured plan. But when I talk about procrastination, all I'm talking about is putting the work off. Now, this is tricky because oftentimes real procrastination will look very, very similar to a few things that we do need to do as writers that just don't involve sitting at the computer. So let me kind of talk through what those are first, because what I certainly do not want is for this video to shame anyone who is making progress, but just in a way that looks a little different than what they thought it would look like. So the first of these ways that are not procrastination is that you will find yourself thinking about the book. Now, this is crucial. You are not ready to write until you have in your mind a really clear sense of what you want the book to do. So we always suggest in the Memoir Method in our group program, we suggest that you should have a key topic, one main central topic, and a key message, one lesson that you want your reader to learn. But whatever type of book you are working on, you need to have that kind of broad foundational understanding of the purpose of the book. Now, we also suggest that you go through and make a whole outline. Regardless, the thing that usually takes the most work is just thinking through the general shape. If you just started your book in 2025, even if it's been a couple of months, it is very possible that the most productive thing you can be doing is actually just thinking about the book. It is very possible that you are not quite ready to sit at the keyboard and type out words. So if you are productively thinking about that book, if you, as you sit down to think, you kind of get new ideas, you're reevaluating your old ideas, you're thinking about kind of the shape, other books that are similar, things like that, that is usually not procrastination, and I don't want you to beat yourself up about that. That is very necessary, and sometimes it's hard to make ourselves do that. So if that is what you're doing, you have my A-OK, my high five. You are doing what you need to do. The second thing that is not procrastination, sometimes people think it is rest. If you have started your book a ways back, if you started, say, mid 2024 or earlier, it is highly, highly possible that you were getting kind of tired by the time we got into the holiday season. And maybe in this kind of darker time of year where a lot of us are sleepy, we want to just hibernate. It is possible that the thing you need most is rest. Rest is so, so crucial to our creative processes. Writing a book takes a lot of energy. It's emotional energy, it's intellectual energy, and it's also physical energy to just sit in front of a computer and make yourself put the words on the page. So, if you need that rest, and trust yourself, you know the answer. If you need that rest, that is not procrastination. Take the rest. Slowing down to really take care of yourself is something that will help you go so much more quickly, so much more efficiently when it is time to get back on track and keep working on that book. And the third way that people will often think that they're procrastinating when actually they're doing something really, really necessary is through play. Now, this can look all kinds of ways, but what I often find is that play, when it comes to moving our writing journey forward, is just intentionally committing to doing things out in the world. Our books are not meant to be insular. Even and maybe especially memoir is about our story, but it's not going to be a successful book unless it is about something larger. So getting into the world, attending your kids' concert, attending a local sporting event, going to the park, when you are out and about in the world, sometimes it feels like procrastination. And when that is happening, I want you instead to evaluate whether you are out there really enjoying that time away from your keyboard. That is what's going to make the difference. In procrastination, when it is true procrastination, we usually do not enjoy the thing that we're doing. It's an unfortunate fact. When we are procrastinating, we often feel really guilty about that. So what I don't want you to do is when you are out and about, out in the world, doing the things that you enjoy, the things that you need to do, the things you do for your family, I do not want you to be beating yourself up. Instead, take that time intentionally as play and realize that while you are doing these kind of fun things, these social things, you are very, very likely also processing themes of your book. So do that on purpose. Embrace that play. That is not procrastination. But there are 4 things that I see over and over and over again that new authors are using as procrastination techniques, even when they don't think they are. So let's talk about what those specifically are. And then, as we go through, I'll give you some tips for getting out of these rabbit holes. So the most common thing I see, the way that authors procrastinate, is by learning about the craft. Now, this is tricky. All of these are tricky, very sneaky. When we are learning about the craft, very often we tell ourselves that we don't know enough to write. And I hear this literally come out of authors' mouths. I'm not ready to write because I don't know enough. This can lead to all kinds of things, and it can look all kinds of ways practically, but one that I see a lot is in purchasing more books about how to write the type of book you're writing. So I primarily work with memoir writers, and this is a big, big one with memoir writers. We've got to buy all of the different books. We've got to read Bird by Bird. We've got to read Mary Karr's work. We've got to pull every single book on memoir that has ever been written. And then we're probably going to go to those authors' YouTube pages or podcasts, and we're going to listen to all of that stuff too. And very often, what has happened is that we have moved through the part of the craft we need to learn about, but at some point, we have diminishing returns. And in fact, often you know enough to get started. And if at that point you keep on reading, you keep on forcing yourself to learn more about the craft, very often what I find is that you will find yourself getting less and less and less competent. So then what happens is this feeds itself, right? If we don't feel confident, if we don't feel worthy of writing this book, we're so tempted to keep on reading, right? So the more we read, the less confident we get, the less confident the more we read. This is exactly the recipe for procrastination, right? Because anytime you are feeling bad about yourself while not doing the work you need to do, surefire sign that you are procrastinating. So, this one's tricky, right? Because we do need to know things about the craft before we can write our book. That much is true. So, what I want you to do, if you suspect you may be going down this path, you may be stuck in this cycle, what I want you to do is I want you to actually make a list of the things that you need to know before you can get started. So, what are some of these things? First of all, I would suggest every author knows something about how to structure your book. If you are writing a memoir or a novel, fiction, you are very often looking at how does the story structure work? What is your narrative arc? How do you plan out, we call these quadrants in the memoir method, how much is happening in each quarter of your book? Depending on how you're approaching this, hero's journey is going to have a different number. If you're doing Save the Cat, that's going to have a different approach. You do need to know something about structure. You don't need to know everything about structure, but you need to know enough that you do feel confident plugging in particular pieces of the story into particular spaces in the length of your book. If you know that, that's probably about what you need to get started on your memoir or your novel, your fiction book. If you are writing more of what I call a prescription nonfiction or an academic nonfiction, your structure is going to be a little bit different. Now, typically with those types of nonfiction, what I find is best is actually to look at the other books that have come out in that general area and see how they've mapped their chapters. This is harder to do with memoir and novels. It's possible, and actually it's a great exercise, but with prescriptive nonfiction, usually you'll be able to see very quickly and very clearly the patterns of how these nonfiction authors in your kind of genre or subspace, how they are structuring their book. You do need to know that. So if you do not feel at all confident about what goes where, that's probably something that you want to kind of target. You may also want to read some about the actual format of the chapters. So if you're doing a novel or a memoir, this is probably about how do scenes and sequels work. So how do we kind of tell the piece of the story, that's the scene, the thing that the camera could capture, and then what do we do for the sequel, which this can vary, but oftentimes I think of the sequel, particularly in memoir, as the reflection or the moving on from that scene you just covered. That's really all you need to know about structuring a chapter, but you may want to read a little bit more. I just want you to keep this bounded. You do not need to know every single convention of writing dialogue, every single convention of how to do a flashback. Oftentimes, these are things that will come to you as you are working through. So you do need to have some idea of structure. But here's a secret I'm going to let you in on. That's mostly all that you need. Think about for your particular book, what are the things you need to feel really confident? Do you need, for instance, do you need to know how to do a flashback? Do you need to know how to format your dialogue? Do you, if you're doing a prescriptive nonfiction book, do you need to know kind of what's the balance you want of anecdotes or stories versus explanation and exposition? Sure, all of these things are valid and fair things that you may want to learn about before you start. But what I want you to do is actually sit down and make a list of what those things are, because that is going to help you see if you are chasing rabbit holes that you do not need to be chasing. If you are diving into whole areas of study that really are either much more advanced or much, much further down the line from where you are right now. Okay, so if you are finding yourself in this first procrastination spiral where you are learning about your craft, but you have been doing that for really some time, I want you to evaluate what you still need to know versus what you already do know. Because the answer to ending this procrastination may simply be realizing that you do know what you're doing, you do deserve to write this book, and you are ready to get started. Okay, number two, the second way that I see this sneaky procrastination come up for authors is similar to learning about the craft, but a little bit different. And that is that you will find yourself digging into research on publishing, agents, editors, all of the stuff that happens way down the line long after you have a draft of your manuscript. Now, long after you have a draft of your manuscript. Now, the reason this one is sneaky is that it actually isn't the worst idea in the world to have some sense of the industry before you get started. This is often something that people will do through a free consultation. We offer those. Lots of people offer those that are out kind of in this publishing world. And of course, there's lots of YouTube videos on publishing. We have quite a few on our channel or podcast. You can check that out. But really what I want to say to you is you do not need to know every step of how that manuscript will turn into a book until you are well into the book. And in fact, one of the things that we recommend in the memoir method is that you give your draft some time to cook before you really dig in to how you want to publish it. And let me kind of give you a specific on how we recommend this and how this often will pop up. So pretty recently we had a guest speaker, a memoirist in the memoir method come in for our quarterly event. And one thing that she was kind of talking about was this real start to finish process, what that was like for her. And she had mentioned one of the components of a formal book proposal, which is finding your comps. So that's your comparative or competing titles. In fiction, often we have those in your query letter. In nonfiction, you'll have a whole section in your book proposal where you are outlining those comps books. Now, one of our members brought up something that I thought was so useful, and I want to pass this on to you. And that is that she asked whether she should be looking at comps books right now. Now, this particular member is about done with her outline, but not quite yet. So the advice that we gave her was wait to kind of dig into those comps until you feel really solid on what your book is. And the reason for that is that what we do not want you to be doing is writing exclusively to the industry. Now, we have a video, a podcast on this from a few weeks back. Should you write for yourself or your audience? Spoiler alert, it's both. But what you don't want to do is end up losing your own voice and your own direction because you're so caught up in whether you're going to get that book deal, whether your readers are going to like the book, how much money you're going to make, whether you're going to get speaking gigs. All that stuff is way down the line. And as long as you are digging into research on this area, you're not getting that manuscript done. Until the manuscript is done, none of that stuff will materialize for you. So what do you do instead if you have gotten kind of caught up in all of this kind of research that goes down the line? Well, I kind of hinted at it a second ago. What I want you to do is refocus on your why. Now, this looks all kinds of ways. Most of the people in the memoir method, their why has something to do with helping others. They want to share something they've been through because they know that those experiences and their overcoming can not only inspire others to live their best lives, but also help those who are going through similar issues to really navigate and really come out as unscathed as possible. That is a great why. We're going to teach other people through our story. We're going to invite them into this umbrella of truth, this kind of circle of humanity we're forming. You might have a different why, but what I want you to focus in on is what are you trying to say and why do you want to say it? When you focus on that, I find that it will often kind of bring us out of that head in the clouds, thinking about the publishing, thinking about that book, what's the cover going to look like, and back into what we really need to be focusing on right at that moment of drafting, which is figuring out what this book even is. So if you are finding yourself in this second sneaky procrastination mode, I want you to focus on your why. Let's leave all that other stuff for down the line. You'll have a way better sense when you get at least halfway through the manuscript. So just put a pin in it. You can revisit it at that point. Okay, the third sneaky way that I see writers procrastinate all the time is editing your previous work. Now, if you just got started, this is probably not a way that you are procrastinating, but I often find those folks that get about halfway through their manuscript, maybe even a little earlier than that, what the big temptation is instead of continuing to draft, it's continuing to go back to the things you already wrote. Now, this is again so sneaky. All of these are sneaky because do we need to revise our work? Yes, eventually. But the problem is when we get into line editing our previous work, and I'm saying line editing very intentionally here, meaning tweaking the word choice, playing with the sentence structure, what we are actually doing is letting ourselves do the fun, easy part in a way that isn't even actually serving us. It feels great to polish up our writing to make it so tight and clean. It feels good. It's relatively easy, certainly easier than putting new words on the page, and certainly easier than doing substantive revision. So it's really easy to get caught up in looking back at the past work, evaluating it, playing around with word choice. So if you are here, I have a great tip for you because I actually find that it can be very useful to look back at your previous work. We just need to make sure that you're sitting on your hands. Yes, sitting on your hands. This is a tip that I get from my right hand, Emily Thrash. She's the other mentor in the Memoir Method group. And one thing that she always recommends is that you literally sit on your hands, don't have a pen in sight, and read back through what you wrote before. The reason we're sitting on our hands is that we are not touching that material. But looking back at the past things that you wrote is a really great way to jog your memory, to remind yourself what is the kind of voice that I'm leaning into? What did I just write about if this is a narrative? What did I just write about so I know kind of what's coming and how I want to get into it? And it can also just kind of get your brain back in that groove of words on the page. But you got to sit on your hands because it is way too easy to start, oh, just change this word, like just fix that typo. And 45 minutes later, you're still doing that, but now your new writing, new drafting time is out. So, if you are finding yourself doing number 3, you are continuously editing the work you've already done, even though you have quite a bit of drafting left, pull yourself out of there, sit on your hands, give yourselves a few minutes to read through what you already did, but not the whole writing time. We got to keep that constrained to make sure that we're not using that to procrastinate against the more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding part of writing new material. Okay, and number 4, the final sneaky way that I see writers procrastinate is cleaning your house. I saved this one for last because I think it's talked about so much that it is almost a little bit cliche, but it is worth including in this video because I have some nuance that I want to add here. I think we often toss around kind of this joke about writers using all their time up by rearranging their desk or cleaning their kitchen or stress baking, sometimes called. One thing I want to say is that there is a way you can make any of those tasks productive for you, and there is a way you can make any of those tasks into procrastination. So what's the difference? If we are cleaning our kitchen, if we are rearranging our desk, and while we are doing that, we're thinking about what we want the book to be. We're almost sometimes rehearsing how the scenes will sound or the particular points we want to make or even bits of language we want to make sure we include. That is worth its weight in gold. When you use that time of kind of fiddling with other things, it's not content intake, it's really low stakes work. That often will kind of give your brain permission to be much more creative. And that's a great thing. If you have ever sat at your computer and just known what you want to write, just known what that first sentence is, that is probably because, whether you realized it or not, your brain was rehearsing what that scene or chapter or idea was going to sound like when you sat down to write it. This is so common, by the way, when you are working on your first, sometimes second, sometimes third chapter. Very often, it just flies off the page. And the reason is that even though you haven't been sitting at the computer, you have been doing the very productive work of mentally rehearsing what you wanted that chapter or scene or idea to be. But the alternative to that is that you are cleaning your kitchen, rearranging your desk, doing whatever it is, and you are feeling such a sense of overwhelm and shame that it is keeping you from wanting to transition to the computer. It's a really big difference, but if you kind of stop and check your body, usually you will be able to tell whether you're in that kind of creative flow, which feels really good, right? Or if you're in that kind of overwhelmed procrastination space, which often feels tight, it feels tight in your shoulders, kind of your neck will hurt. At least that's me. However, stress shows up in your body, you're going to be able to feel that. So, what I want you to do, if you find yourself in that latter camp where you realize that you're using these other tasks because you feel so overwhelmed, either with the book or with the book on top of other things going on in your life, I want you to regroup. Now, you may want to shift to a different task, but whatever you choose, I want you to choose something that's going to allow you to be kind to yourself and to find the calm and the peace in what it is you are trying to tell the world. This might be reflecting on your own life if you're writing a memoir. This might be making a social statement or some other kind of intervention into how we think of narrative if you are working on a novel, if you're working on fiction. Or it might be the thing that is so important, you have to get this big idea out there if you're writing prescriptive nonfiction. Whatever it is, this is a really cool thing you're doing. It is such a particular interior type of communication when we write a book, when we invite other people into our inner worlds. What a gift, right? So I want you to take a deep breath. I want you to drop those shoulders. And instead of feeling so overwhelmed, instead of feeling that kind of panic in your body, I want you to slow down a little bit. And as you load that dishwasher, I want you to think about what it is you're trying to do and how special that is, and the fact that you are the only one that can do it. I want you to use that time instead of being overwhelmed to really get in touch with what your purpose is and what you want to do with this book. Take a deep breath, do some yoga, take a shower, whatever it is that relaxes you. Do that. That's going to be way more productive. Okay, as promised, I have one final tip that is really an overarching way, not only to stop procrastination, but also to really keep yourself accountable and realize definitively whether you even are procrastinating or whether you're doing one of those three things I said at the beginning: thinking about the book, resting, or playing. And what that tip is that you got to make a plan. Now, I mentioned earlier in the memoir method, we have a whole set of steps that takes people through how to make this plan. That is not the largest part of the program, but it certainly is the foundational piece that allows you to keep that steady momentum going. All that is included in that is that you know what your topic is, you know what your message is, and you have an outline with descriptions of each chapter you want to write. That is going to be the same regardless of the type of book you're writing. And the benefit of that is it's going to tell you exactly what you need to be working on day to day, week to week, so that you know you're making progress. And when you have that outline and when you have decided how quickly you want to move through that outline, you will now have a foolproof way to look at your calendar, look at your outline, and look at your output and see whether they match up. Most of us are going to get a week or two off at some point, but if you are finding that you are weeks delayed on every chapter, that's a really good sign that something else is happening. Think back to these tips I've given you, these ways that writers procrastinate that are so sneaky we sometimes don't even see them ourselves, and really evaluate whether that is something you're doing. Now, if you want help to figure out how to make this plan, we have a couple free resources. We, of course, have the Memoir Method checklist. You can download that at pageandpodium.com/checklist. And we also have a planning calculator that you can use, pageandpodium.com/calculator. That is just going to help you figure out how long the project is going to take. It's going to help you set your writing goals, when you want to write, how much you want to get done. But between those two resources, as well as, of course, all of the other resources on our podcast and YouTube. There should be plenty of materials that you can be ready to move forward and feel really, really confident in the work that you're doing. Okay, as you move forward, the main thing I want you to remember is to be kind to yourself. The days are short, but they're getting longer. We're going to have spring before we know it, and all of us are going to be ready to hit the ground running in this new year. Let me know if there's anything I can help with, how I can support you, and how your book is going. And until then, happy writing. You know what they say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this is exactly what holds so many people back on their memoir projects. That is exactly why we created the Memoir Method Checklist, a full, complete list of every single step you need to take to get that memoir written, published, and marketed successfully. You can download it now at pageandpodium.com/checklist.